story. KwaZulu-Natal Premier Nomusa Dube-Ncube says the death toll from yesterday's storm has risen to 10, including 3 people that were killed outside the eThekwini metro. Strong winds and heavy rain have led to the floods that damaged formal and informal houses in the eThekwini municipalities. Areas such as Verulam have also been hard hit. Let's now bring in the climate adaptation lead and World Bank senior advisor Dhesigen Naidoo to make sense of these climate change phenomenon that parts of the country is currently experiencing. Thank you so much for your time, and of course good afternoon to you. Now, several parts of the country are under some form of a weather warning, especially in Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, with the latest weather warning placing KZN at level 4. I mean, what can we attribute this extreme deadly weather to?
Well, good afternoon to you and to all the viewers. We are in the middle of an extreme climate change response. Just to put this in perspective, we're not only talking about South Africa, but the whole of the Southern African region is either in a state of flood warning or in a state of drought warning, and in some of the countries around us already having declared emergencies. And this is a very real phenomenon around the world, actually. And part of the reason is that our global warming has reached such a level that there is a huge amount of energy inside the system, and this is how it gets expressed. Just to give you one of the really important facts that has now been audited out, 2023 has already been 1.48 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. Remember, we were targeting 1.5 to only be reached by 2100, and we're almost there already. And what we are seeing is a massive change in weather patterns that is giving us these very devastating flood and drought events.
And I'm glad you mentioned, Southern Africa, because in some reports that I've looked at, placing and saying that Southern Africa is particularly vulnerable to climate change, and that warming in the interior is occurring at about, I think, twice the global average rate. Then there's the flooding and the drought, etc. How do we then safe-proof ourselves against climate emergency?
Well, there are 2 things we have to do. The first thing is the disaster management, because the reality is we're already at almost this 1.5 level. We're probably going to a +2 degree level. So our ability to deal at scale with these kinds of events really has to be ramped up. We have to do a lot more around our disaster risk financing. We have to do a lot more around our response mechanisms, because our responses have to be quick. They have to be adequate so that people don't have the kind of damage that we currently do. But in the longer term, we just have to shore up against this. So this is the investment we need to make in climate adaptation. And it's quite massive. We need to climate-proof our infrastructure. We have to change our rules around how we build and where we build. We also have to organize to get our people into much safer environments than many people currently are in.
And I mean, you mentioned, the funding element of it. The cost of extreme weather globally apparently stands at around $400 billion, forecasted to grow to $1 trillion, per annum within the 10-year period. In the first half of 2021, I think this was the fact that staggered me. All provinces in the country experience flooding. I mean, so it becomes even real from a financial sense. What then is being done from a financial sense? Or in fact, how devastating is this in our economy?
It is massive. It is absolutely massive. I mean, if you look at the cost factors associated with average flood and drought events, even when they were in the old timetable of 1 every 7 years or so, we already were not able to afford them. We're now looking at these events almost every year with the same kind of intensity. So what the South African government is currently doing is it's now developing out 2 things that are really important. One is developing out a disaster risk financing strategy. We need a much smarter way to make funds available to deal with these events in the very short term. And the second is actually reviewing our disaster management system around adequacy. But in the longer term, and this is really critical, I mean, the president himself mentioned this issue after the 22 2022 rain bomb event in eThekwini, he said that in the way we organize to recover from this, we have to build back better and smarter and have a higher resilience coefficient around how we go into the future, because we do know it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And we can't organize for ourselves not to do enough so that we spend all of the finance we have in just recovery. We also have to build further and increase our resilience as we're going into the future. And what we're finding, in addition to that, is that there are some communities are having these repeated events over and over and again. I mean, Verulam and Tongaat is a great example of this, where the same people are going through the same phenomenon almost year after year since 2022.
And I mean, we've just come out of a very crucial election that is possibly going to shape, the way things are conducted going forward. I mean, what are some of the key issues you think that, government should then concentrate on, particularly as you start, talking about climate proofing, our environments in this country?
Well, one of the things that the PCC has done pre-election is examine the manifestos of all of the parties. And one of the fortunate positions that South Africa has, and you will know that there are some much bigger countries that don't have the same position, is that by and large, all of the parties recognize the climate change phenomenon and are happy to invest in doing something about it. So I think we have a good starting point. But the big thing that we have to do is simultaneously organize for our decarbonization, our transition to low carbon energy sources. And we already have a big push around solar, for example, and we need to do this in several other places. And simultaneous to that is to make the big investments around our infrastructure to climate proof them and to organize for adaptation to become a very big part of how we do our planning going forward. These are very big investments. We're talking about reinvesting in a new infrastructure for water. We're talking about switching to climate smart agriculture. We're talking about reorganizing the built environment. The bottom line is, if we don't, we have many bigger problems to face than the ones that we're facing now with these droughts and floods. We potentially could be in the domain of food insecurity if we don't adapt quickly enough, for example, to climate smart agriculture. So this has to be the new investment plan for South Africa going forward.
Dhesigen, thank you so much for your time. And of course, just contextualizing what we're currently seeing is in fact part of a much bigger problem. That was, of course, Dhesigen Naidoo, Climate Adaptation Lead and World Bank Senior Advisor.